Rosie Purchas. Yeah, Rosie?
Hi.
Good morning, Rosie. I think you've seen the format. You've been in the room. Yes. You can see people around the table. Matt Ducey will be joining us eventually, but welcome. Thank you very much. Please take as read that we have read your submission. The time is yours. We have 5 minutes. I'll give you a heads up as we get close to that.
Can I just start, first of all, by I have...
If you'd like to give it to the clerk, they'll certainly help you with that.
This is a supplementary submission.
Just a wee light one.
Just a little, but it's very important. It's thoroughly researched,
Sure.
and it's partly in response to the opponents, the NZMA and psychiatrists.
Sure, go ahead, Rosie.
Righto. Well, I think the context is really important, which is that the Labour Party promised to absolutely support sick patients who have chosen to use cannabis, and this was supported by the 2017 New Zealand Drug Foundation that said that 75% of New Zealanders support this proposition also. The sheer numbers of people using cannabis is important to know that in 2011, the Auckland University Alcohol and Public Health Research Unit estimated 480,000, but in 2017, that's 6 years later, the Global Drug Survey said that 38.6% of adults in New Zealand will have used cannabis in that year, which comes to 1,850,368 people. 80% of young people up to age 21 will have used cannabis in any 1 year, according to Chapter 20 of Otago University's book, Cannabis Use in Adolescence. It is the most commonly used drug in the world, and I think it's important to realise that people would not be using it if it didn't have a personal benefit to them. The greatest harm to all these people is the social harm of prohibition and the risk of the criminal justice system. And this is a human rights argument, and it was taken up by the Canadians. It went to the Supreme Court level in 1997, that's nearly 20 years ago, in the case of R.V. Parker, where the Court of Appeal upheld by the Supreme Court held that it was a breach of human rights, a breach of the particular human right of life, liberty and security of person to prevent somebody from being able to cultivate and use cannabis for his or her medical benefit. And I think these human rights are very important. It's not the only one. In Mexico, there was another case that supported 3 people when they in the court when they said that it ruined their personality to not be able to do it. They needed it, and that is Article 29 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Now, we are subject to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights as well, and I think that is one of the major supports for allowing people to make their own choice. And in fact, the GP submission supports it to an extent that although they agree with the New Zealand Medical Association that they would prefer a pharmaceutical model, they do accept that in the absence of that, and there's a reason why the pharmaceutical model is not entirely appropriate for cannabis, which I'll talk about in a second, they do support what I say in my first submission, is that the complementary and alternative medicines and informed consent procedure is the correct way to go for patients who wish to choose medical cannabis. Now, in 2010, the Law Commission was in exactly the same position that you're in now, which is the same old arguments of you've got a lot of patients saying we want to use medical cannabis, we want our right to use medical cannabis. And then you've got the New Zealand Medical Association saying no, we only support a pharmaceutical model because we only support a gold standard level of efficacy. Now, there are problems with getting that gold standard of efficacy, and that is it's difficult to get clinical trials when cannabis is illegal. The second point, it's difficult to get a placebo that smells, tastes and performs like cannabis. Most people have tried it and they know which is the placebo and which isn't. It's expensive to do a clinical trial, And there's a big risk to the directors of pharmaceutical corporations who owe duties to their shareholders that they will reduce their profits in so doing, because already we can see that there's been a 25% opioid reduction, losing billions of dollars to the pharmaceutical industries in just a couple of years in Colorado, where medical cannabis, or all cannabis, is legalized. So we also have our own national drug policy. Our own national drug policy has two slogans, you could call them. It's a health issue, not a crime. That ties back to what I was saying before, is the greatest harm to patients is the risk of the criminal justice system, and that is huge. In my first submission, you saw I did a survey of 350 patients, 25% of whom had been brought before the court system. As a lawyer, I know how much that costs and what stress that creates to these people who are already incredibly sick, and it just simply is wrong. We have our own health policy saying it's a health issue, not a crime, and we have a second part of our national drug policy which says innovation, proportionality, compassion. In the bill, there is no innovation. You might say giving a terminally ill a defence if their doctor certifies that they will be dead in a year is a defence. Well, the GPs have already said that's a very difficult certification for them to make, and for that reason they prefer the CAM method, which I have elaborated in my second submission, which I've just given you. And I also got hold of an informed consent from a doctor in America, which is what they use to trigger the legal status of a medical cannabis patient using cannabis, because as with here, it's not, in California they have to recommend it as opposed to prescribe it because it's a plant. So I'm suggesting we do the same, we use the same thing here and use this informed consent procedure, the informed consent form which a patient can discuss with his doctor, and once it's signed, then that becomes the certification required for a person not to be able to be prosecuted at all. Because it's very well to say prosecute them and then make them go to court and go through the whole legal process and the fear and the stress of it anyway. But if you go to the GP, what the GPs recommend and what I recommended, which I rewrote the bill in that first submission at the end to incorporate this, where you do just use the informed consent procedure as the procedure to get patients over the hurdle to not be prosecuted. It's very, very important that they are protected and supported from the criminal justice system.
Rosie, are you able to take a question? We have reached our time. Are you able to take a question?
I haven't finished yet. I've got really important things.
I understand, but we have to have others with important things. Are you able to take a question?
Yes, please.
Good. Angie, do you have a question?
I don't actually. Not one that can be. I do want to have a good read of.
Yeah, me too.
That's really important for looking at the Medical Association's claims. I've gone into extensive research where they've made errors. Actually, with the greatest of respect, they have made some serious errors in their risk of harms claims. And I've set out evidence which supports my position.
I particularly appreciate the information that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, in terms of that definition of chronic pain, the World Health Organization, in fact, did an enormous investigation into finding the definition of pain, and they have come up with a definition which I've included in that submission, and I've linked you to the study which the World Health Organization attached to it.
Last question, Liz Craig, and we will read this.
Thank you, I have. Yeah.
So it'd be good just to get your take on one particular thing, because we're talking about informed consent and risk of harm. What's your sense that other jurisdictions have addressed that issue of the young developing brain and risk of psychosis? and obviously it gets to do with the ratio of THC, CBD. But in your sense, what other overseas jurisdictions have addressed that in a way that would be useful for thinking about it here?
I think Canada's the one that you look to in terms of that sort of research. And there's a website called Health Canada where they go through every study made on almost every issue to do with cannabis, and there are numerous studies and examinations on all aspects, including the young developing brain. And well, I think they what they do is they have an age limit, and but you've also got the important thing to note is microdosing versus what I would call abuse. When a person's sick, they don't sit around, smoking or having oil for one after the other all day. It's microdosing, and that is no harm to the young brain. When they talk about abuse to the young brain, they're talking about people who are actually abusing cannabis, not using cannabis, and certainly not using it medicinally. So I'm very sceptical about. I agree with that those studies say what they say, but in terms of using it medicinally, that's not possible because you simply don't have the increased the amounts that are when abused, and that's where an education model is also very important. And at the back of my first submission, I've actually written in a licensing system, which was compiled a few years ago by a group of people which I then wrote up, which we're going to discuss more on Wednesday with Green Cross Group, because the director of Green Cross was also part of that system. But that would be very important in terms of the young developing brain, because what it does is it has a swipe card that you purchase it from a pharmacy, but you have a swipe card rather like a sub card every time you do. And not only would you get amazing statistics in terms of health policy and costs and all the rest of it, but you would be able to know how much exactly someone was using, and alarms would go on, rather like, if someone uses your bank card and you get a phone call from the bank saying, did you spend $3,000? Someone would contact that person and be able to say, we noticed that your use is incredibly high. Is there a problem? A much more sort of compassionate approach.
Rosemary, this is very helpful, and again, we will certainly read this. We can see at first blush that there's some really interesting and good material in there, so
thank you very much
for that.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicky, who do we have next? Kia ora whaere, haere mai ki konei. Kia ora koutou. You've seen the format via. My name's Dr. Shane Reti. You can see the members around the table, Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark, Dr. Liz Craig, and Namai haere mai whakataumai. The time is yours. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
This is a copy of the benefits of medicinal marijuana and hemp that I'd like to add. There's 15 copies
We'll pass it to
there.
the clerk who'll
I just
distribute it.
wanted to add that into my submission.
Thank you.
I feel very strongly about having medicinal marijuana made legal, because I'm a 3-time survivor of cancer, and I have used marijuana right through from when I was first diagnosed back in 2001, because of the effects of paracetamol and all the other pharmaceutical painkillers have on my liver and everything. I've had damage to my liver through some of those medicines, and I no longer wish to take them. I make my cream. I got my recipe from YouTube. And I'm not the only one doing this. I'm 76 years old, and I have cousins in the same age group who are all doing this. They're actually going into hospitals and massaging people who are in pain and the doctors are turning a blind eye because they don't have to give them any morphine or hard drugs after they've been in massaging the patients. Now, this is the reason why I think, and plus the fact that in my iwi, I'm a kaikaranga. I don't want to smoke it anymore because it will damage my lungs and stop me from being a good kaikaranga. So I would like to see it made legal for these uses. You know what I've got in my submission. So that's basically what I want to see. Because Ngātamea, it's like the last lady said, practically well over a third of the country are using it. But not all of us are using it to smoke. We're using it as a medicine. And it is a medicine to me. I grew up in a family where my great-grandmother taught my mother Māori rongoa. I spent my childhood never going to a doctor because my mother treated me. Marijuana is no different to that, and I feel the same way about hemp, which could be building us cheap houses right now. and all of the other things it could be doing for us. Plus the fact that if you went and authorised all of our iwi to grow hemp and grow marijuana, you would get the money back in tax tenfold, or probably more. And it would benefit all New Zealanders, not just us. And who knows, we may even make enough to buy back our country eventually.
Tēnā koe whai, he maramana tō whakaaro, he nā pia ko tēnei te pātai ki a koe. Matt, do you have a question?
No questions from me. Thank
Good.
you.
Angie.
Thank you for coming all this way, Whyte.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just looking at you've been using opioids in the past and now you've moved to the cream. One of the previous submitters said that they kind of needed both to keep, the pain at bay.
No, I don't agree with that.
So basically you're finding enough pain relief with your cream.
I have half my family using the cream.
Yeah.
We all get rheumatoid arthritis in my family, quite a few of us. It's like Russian roulette, who gets it? And all the ones with with rheumatoid arthritis, they're using my cream.
Okay, and don't need anything else to top up?
No, they don't want to take painkillers either. Where all of us are very anti-pharmaceutical companies. They're making money out of us being sick. They don't make medicines that fix us. They make medicines that we have to keep taking so they get rich.
And does it just take the edge off, or does it completely relieve the symptoms?
Pardon?
Does it just take the edge off the pain, or does it completely relieve the symptoms?
If you rub it onto your skin, it goes straight into your bloodstream. Within 20 minutes, you're comfortable, and it'll last for about 4 hours. And you can, if you've got rheumatoid arthritis, it really is a boon. And you don't have to take painkillers. You can use it for headaches. You can use it for acne. We cured one of my nephews of the worst case of acne I've ever seen. You can use it for fungus infections. I've cured my own fungus infection with it. You can use it on animals, and it cures them too. So, it's a medicine to me, and I would like to see it legalised, because I really don't want to go to jail for doing this, but I'm going to continue doing it, whether you legalise it or not.
Kia ora whai, tēnā koe mō tō kōrero I tēnei ata. Travel well, noho ora mai.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Good. Who do we have next up? Hillary Stace. Hi, Hillary. Would you like to come on up to the table? Hillary, you've seen the format this morning.
Yep.
You can see everyone around the table. We have 5 minutes. The time is yours. I'll give you a heads up as we get close. But thank you again, Hillary. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my main submission, that I'm a researcher in disability policy and bioethics, two of my interests. And thank you very much for this opportunity. and I'm speaking as an individual here. This bill is a good start, but it is much too restrictive. Medicinal cannabis needs to be available on prescription for those in pain with chronic conditions, not just with terminal illness. And I've got 4 points. For older people, I would like to start with the story of my 97-year-old mother-in-law, who I mentioned in my written submission. One night she fell in her aged care facility, broke her arm, pelvis and ribs. She is allergic to opiates and opioids, so the only pain relief available to her in hospital was Panadol and ibuprofen. Under this bill, a doctor could decide that she could have medicinal cannabis, but only if it was considered that she had less than a year to live. That would be offensive to a feisty woman who is not yet ready to go. 4 months on, her bones are slowly healing, and her brain is as active as ever, but she still has considerable pain. And wouldn't it be wonderful if she could have ready access to medicinal cannabis to ease her pain and help her sleep? And medicinal cannabis must be available to those in pain and with chronic conditions. I can speak from experience, having had acute pancreatitis and eventual gallbladder surgery a few months ago. That pain was intense. Again, the pain relief available is limited and has significant side effects. While struggling on tramadol, an opioid, on Christmas Eve, I fell and broke my ankle, resulting in several more weeks of pain, which hasn't actually finished yet. Doctors readily prescribe tramadol and codeine. These strong painkillers are sitting in the medicine cabinets in many homes. It would be sensible to have another and potentially safer choice. Why is cannabis tincture or balm, particularly without the THC, more dangerous than tramadol and codeine? With strong regulation and public oversight, we could ensure it was of high and consistent quality and accessible to those who could benefit. Another area I'm interested in is I would like to mention the exciting potential of medicinal cannabis for a condition like autism, and I see you've already had some references to research. There is nothing wrong with autism, which is just part of human diversity. And the latest statistics have 1 in 59 people on the spectrum. But some people with autism have extreme sensitivities, pain and anxiety that can manifest in complex behaviour, which can make life hard for parents and carers, as well, of course, for themselves. I'm talking about not sleeping, hyperactive, violent, and self-harming behaviours. Many children and adults with behaviours like this are already on a long-term cocktail of medication, including antipsychotics, with serious side effects including diabetes and heart disease. Exciting new research on CBD and children with autism indicates it can be calming with minimal side effects. I've got a couple of references, but so I would love to see New Zealand lead clinical trials on medicinal cannabis for behaviour related to autism, just as a start. And as someone with an interest in research ethics and vulnerable populations, I know we can do this. And as a comment, I've been involved with the support around Ashley Peacock, who's been in the news. Here's an adult, a 40-year-old adult, still locked up at huge expense to the state on lots of medication over many years, when nobody's actually ever thought of maybe something like medicinal cannabis could have been something that could have been used in cases like Ashley and others, if it was readily available, if it was considered, something that could have been tried.
Hilary, can we ask a few questions?
Yes, so in the meantime, just regulate it really. Make it accessible to those who need it. We've had so many good ideas. Just do it.
Thank you. Matt Ducey, do you have any questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
With Liz. I think it's been so concise, and we've really got the thrust and the feel of what you're trying to convey to us that I think that sums it up.
There's a meta-analysis about research with children and medical cannabis that was done in one of those major journals that actually showed it was really good for things like nausea and chemotherapy, and epilepsy. So, I mean, I can send those links if you want.
It would be useful if we could arrange with the clerk for that. That would be very good.
It's a new and emerging area, and there's not been much done, but looking good.
It'll be a very good submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who do we have next? Michael Nichols, please. Hello, Michael. Hi. Michael's at the back there, so he'll just make his way through. Good morning, Michael. Please have a seat. Good morning. You've seen the format of how we do things, that the committee have introduced themselves. Welcome to you. The time is yours. I'll give you a heads up as we get close to time. But again, thank you very much for coming here this morning, so please proceed.
Well, firstly, let me say that my doctor title is not a medical qualification. It's a PhD in horticultural science. So I'm interested in the crop production of cannabis for medicinal purposes, and that obviously impinges on medical use of it later on. One of the big problems, though, that faces people wanting to use medical cannabis is the cost. If you go to your doctor, you go through a big hassle to get hold of any, if you can get hold of any, and then it's going to cost something in excess of $1,000 a month, which is not an inconsiderate amount of money. And I can't see any prospect of Pharmac ever subsidising cannabis from that point of view. It would be too much. So we've got to have a look at ways in which we can reduce the cost to the consumer, assuming that we are going to be allowed to use medicinal cannabis in New Zealand. I think we can grow it in New Zealand very efficiently. In fact, a lot of people grow medicinal cannabis quite efficiently. I think it could be greatly improved our production systems. But there's also an interesting fact that the world demand for medicinal cannabis in 2025 is estimated to be 75 billion New Zealand dollars. I should add as an aside that the recreational cannabis market is 3 times that at that time. That's what they estimate anyway. But 75 billion New Zealand dollars is not an inconsiderate sum, and there's no reason why if we produced medicinal cannabis here in New Zealand, we couldn't have a very good export market. There's one particular country that I think of, which is to the northwest of us with a very big population, which is very taken with natural plant or natural medicines as opposed to laboratory-produced medicines. That's People's Republic of China, and I think there'd be a tremendous export potential there. The problem is that currently it's illegal to grow cannabis in New Zealand unless you are growing industrial hemp, which has to be below 0.35% THC. And I would suggest that this goes right back to, I think it's the 1973 Misuse of Drugs Act. And cannabis at that stage, people just thought cannabis, that's dope, full stop. So we put that on the list of drugs that we shouldn't take. And they didn't think of any of the alternatives. They didn't consider hemp, for example, which only has survived really, I think, because of the Iron Curtain countries, where they kept the thing running. And I would suggest that the first strategy that one should look at is actually to change the law in relation to cannabis and only make it necessary to get approval to grow one type of cannabis, and that's the high THC cannabis, and that any other type of cannabis be just treated as a normal crop plant. And I think you should draw the level of perhaps 1% THC as being what you call THC level, and anything below that is not THC level. And at that stage, you would do away with a lot of all the expense of growing hemp, because of...
No, keep the hop as well.
We'll keep the hops going, yes, although there are problems with alcohol that I won't go into here. One point is that there are really 2 types of cannabis medicines, and I think people don't tend to separate them out very carefully. One is the CBD-based ones, and the other one's the THC-based ones. And I simplify it in my mind, and it's an oversimplification that the CBD ones handle things like epilepsy and those sorts of things, and the THC ones handle the problems of pain relief and that sort of thing. That's an oversimplification of the scene, but I think that's how I would see it at this present stage. Now, growing medicinal cannabis is very different from growing industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is a broad-acre crop. Medicinal cannabis is a highly specialised crop which is probably going to be grown in greenhouses or even in plant factories. And that requires special skills, but it's also very important because you're dealing with something that's going to be taken in by the person, and you don't want pesticides and those sorts of things sprayed willy-nilly around something that you're going to use for that. I think the potential for growing medicinal cannabis in New Zealand is huge. The export potential is astronomical if we get our act into gear. And if I can just sidestep a little bit, back in the 1950s, there was research being done on the morphine poppy, the opium poppy in Blenheim. And for some reason or other, which nobody seems to know, it didn't get picked up in New Zealand. It went to Tasmania, which now produces half, two-thirds of the world's morphine and codeine, for medicinal purposes. And we've missed our flip. If we're not careful, we're going to miss our flip in relation to medicinal cannabis as a potential export earner.
Michael, can we ask you a brief question or two?
Yeah, sure.
Time is expiring. First of all, the legislation is specifically looking at regulation-making ability for the manufacture of cannabis products. So that's reassuring and in alignment with what you're saying. And secondly, the cannabidiol that we've approved allows a 5% THC impurity level. So you were saying maybe 1%.
Okay, I suggested the point. Yeah. Well, it's a question that there's a lot of expense in getting approval to grow hemp. I think the registration costs about $500. To me, growing of hemp shouldn't be a responsibility of the Ministry of Health, for example. It should be a responsibility of the Ministry of Primary Industries. The medicinal aspects, once you've grown the crop, clearly fit in with the Ministry of Health. But the growing of the plant, whether it's for hemp or whether it's for medicinal cannabis, is really a primary industries aspect. And any requirements for registration should be organised by the Ministry of Health. And if you could do away with the Ministry of Primary Industries, if you could do away with the need to have to go through that hassle for hemp, you would expand the hemp industry quite quickly, I think.
We haven't had a crop specialist, so we'll just extend a few of the questions. Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, and I want to carry on with that line of questioning, because I think that's right. I was just thinking about your reference to the hops. I suppose if we were to grow both plants, I hope we don't get them mixed up.
Well, actually,
could make for an interesting alcohol, I suppose.
If I can just make a comment, did you know you can graft cannabis onto hops?
Okay, so we'll probably stay back in the scope of the committee thing.
What you're speaking to is, and look, it might sound political, but I don't mean it to be. The problem we've got is the new government gave themselves a target of a 100-day plan. I mean, that's clearly in the explanatory note of this bill, the reference to why the bill has turned up in this form, because there is real criticism that the regulatory regime is very light. In fact, it's not there. And why are we having this discussion now in isolation around the supply side when arguably we could have waited 6, 9, 12 months and done it more in an integrated field? Because there is a lot of confusion. I mean, you're speaking to the potential risks we might lose if we don't get that regime right, economically and developmental-wise. So how are you going to provide further input when this comes all back round again into Parliament? Have you thought about that? Because you're going to have a lot of knowledge around that supply side, and I'm sure there's people behind you as well.
Well, I think the supply side is quite an interesting aspect, because in fact, if I can digress a minute, over my lifetime, I've seen greenhouse tomato crops go from 250 tonnes per hectare up to 800 tonnes per hectare.
Yeah.
And that's because of research and improvements in technology and so on. The cannabis industry has not had those inputs. There's, as far as I know, there's probably three or four pieces of research work ever been peer-reviewed and published on cannabis. Two of them come out of Belgium. One actually comes out of New Zealand, which is not a very good paper, but that's by the way. And there's a couple, I think, have come out of the University of Guelph. Now, that's not to say people aren't doing research on cannabis. I'm sure that the big organisations in North America, particularly the States, have done research, but it's all in-house, so it's not going to be available for people.
So your first point is that we should be growing it within New Zealand.
Oh, absolutely.
To supply.
Yeah. And
then your differentiation between hemp and plants that have THC. I mean, we should be kind of growing all of the above and working through it.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with the need to have legislation in terms of who should grow the high THC cannabis. I think that should be there, but I can't see any. Otherwise, I think we should treat cannabis just like a normal agricultural crop and say anyone can grow cannabis, but if you want to grow high THC cannabis, then you're going to have to go through.
You're almost advocating for a system that's not licensed.
Yeah, a non-licensed system, except for the high THC. I think there's a need.
Pragmatically, can you go in and test that as someone who was the regulatory body that a crop met a criteria for not or having high THC?
Good high THC cannabis is 18 to 20%, something like that.
Yeah.
Hemp has to be low 0.35%. If you draw the line at say 1%, you've got a fair separation. Yeah. Nobody is going to want to have cannabis THC of 5%. They won't be interested in that.
But are we going to get set up in this sort of issue where people are trying to pose high THC plants off as hemp plants in their backyard so they don't need a license?
No, because the law would still allow you to test for those, and if you have, you've broken the law. You've got to have a license. And that's why I think you have to have a licensing scheme for anyone growing the high THC.
Yeah.
And I disagree with this idea that people who are terminally ill can grow a few plants at home.
Yeah.
I've been involved in quite a few court cases as an expert witness on cannabis, and I got rung up several years ago now, by a lawyer saying, what should I do? This lady was growing 5 plants at home. She's got arthritis and the police want to prosecute. And I said, it's going to cost you too much money to go through the legal system of using me as an expert witness, because I probably won't get her off anyway, and you as a lawyer or a barrister, it's not going to work. Plead guilty and pay the fine, or offer to go, she was 70-something, offer to go to prison if necessary. You know.
Michael, last question, briefly, is Craig.
Just interested in your passing comments about high THB being good for pain relief and high CBD good for epilepsy.
Hmm?
What's the extent of the research based on that? And where are we up to?
It's the best research, as far as I know, that's been done on cannabis from a medical point of view has been done by GW Pharmaceuticals in UK, and they've done blind and double-blind medical research, which is the standard that one should use, I guess. If you just have normal blind, it doesn't work because somebody's going to know what's been done. But double blind is the gold standard, if you like, for medical research, and they've done it. That's GW Pharmaceuticals.
Has been published?
Yes. If you look up GW Pharmaceuticals on the web, you'll find a massive information. Well, they're the people that supply Sativex and Epidiolex, is it? Epidiolex, the CBD medicine here in New Zealand. And that's, I think, the only material that's available clinically.
Thank you, Matt. Closing question.
How frustrated will you be if you find out the regulatory regime on the supply side, there'll be no public consultation on that?
I'd be unhappy. I'd like to be involved in talking to people about it. In fact, there are really two people that I'm aware of pushing for approval. There's some people in Auckland and there's some people in Ruatoria. Now, I think the people in Auckland have probably got it much more right than the people in Ruatoria as to they want to go through the system very carefully. They don't want to use people that have had experience of growing cannabis previously. And I think that's one thing you've got to look at very carefully. But then there's a social aspect there as well. Okay. So it's quite complicated.
Okay, Mark, thank you. You bring a really interesting perspective to this discussion. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Certainly. Nandor Tanczos by teleconference. Dr. Michael Nichols. Dr. Michael Nichols. Good morning, Nandor. Can you hear me? Yes, good. We might just volume up at our end again as well if we can. Nandor, this is Dr. Shane Reti speaking, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning we have MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark and Dr. Elizabeth Craig. Thank you very much for calling in this morning and for making a submission. Please take as read anything that you've submitted. We have read. We have 5 minutes with you. The time is yours. If you could leave some questions, that would be great. Again, thank you for calling in, Nandor. The time is yours.
Thank you, Shane. And thank you to the committee for the opportunity to present on this bill. So I've been an advocate for legislative change to allow medicinal cannabis for almost 30 years. Not for my own benefit, I don't suffer from any illness. My interest is that I know of a number of people who benefit from using medical cannabis but are punished for doing so. Now, often people are very ill. They've tried all of the drugs prescribed by their doctor and found them either ineffective or with intolerable side effects. Some of them, particularly if they're elderly or very sick, live in very real fear of being arrested. They have to engage in risky behaviour to acquire their medicine from the illegal market. A number have actually been arrested, and even though there's no question that their use was medicinal, they've been charged, prosecuted for their medicine thieves, they've been fined and sometimes even sent to jail. I know many people who use cannabis for severe and chronic pain, many of them elderly. I know people who have used it to counteract severe nausea and loss of appetite from AIDS medication and chemotherapy. These are people who literally have no idea how long they will be alive, or who live with such pain that they sometimes wish they weren't. And yet we prosecute them for using a herbal medicine that gives them some relief. And it's frankly disgraceful. So I welcome this bill as an attempt to catch up with the rest of the world, both the provisions around CBD, but particularly the Section 5 amendment to Section 7 of the Primary Act to exempt some people from the Misuse of Drugs Act. But sadly, without significant amendments, it will still leave us with one of the most impractical and unhelpful regimes on the planet. I know that this committee is grappling with where to draw the line around those exemptions from medical cannabis use. And as I said in my written representation, it shouldn't be for MPs to decide what medicines are appropriate for which cases. This committee, in my view, should take a very broad approach and leave it to doctors to determine how it should apply in any individual case. I think doctors are the key to any medical marijuana regime. They are the safeguards. This bill, in my view, should empower doctors to do what they do best, which is make the right clinical decisions for their patients. We either trust doctors or we don't. We trust them with all kinds of life life or death decisions. We trust them to prescribe highly addictive, far more dangerous drugs than cannabis, yet we seem unable or unwilling to trust them with this. I said in my written presentation that instead of terminal illness, the bill should refer to any qualifying condition, and that those qualifying conditions should be specified in regulations. If you choose to go down that path, I think it would be helpful if the committee in its report back stated what range of conditions it thinks should apply immediately. It may be that the committee instead prefers to be explicit in the legislation about what conditions should apply. Either way, there's good evidence, both clinical evidence and what I call lay science, for its value in treating chronic pain and spasticity, as well as nausea and vomiting, loss of appetite, and a wide range of other chronic and debilitating conditions. Given the relative safety of cannabis compared to many prescription drugs for managing pain and other conditions, I think a broad approach is warranted. Thank you for your time.
Nandor, as we expected, a very concise and thoughtful presentation. Thank you. I'll go to Angie Warren-Clark for any questions first.
Kia ora, Nandor. I am just wanting to... We always struggle a little bit with the term chronic pain, and you've included this. I really like the qualifying condition definition that you're suggesting around transferring from terminal illness to qualifying condition. I think that's thoughtful. You've included here chronic pain. Any thoughts on how we would look at chronic pain within this context?
Yeah, again, I think my view really is that you have to trust doctors to do what's right for their patients. I think that the committee and the Parliament should take a broad approach to what they will allow doctors to look at, and then allow doctors to deal with the specifics of a patient. I think it's very difficult to draw those kinds of lines in legislation because you're dealing with often very individual circumstances. So as I said before, I think we have to rely on doctors as the safeguard within the system.
Thank you. And so just to follow up with that, do you believe that going down this track around qualifying condition, do you expect that, because legislation, as you know, is quite a clunky process in terms of regulations, so qualifying condition would have to have a definition, and that definition would have to be restricted to start off with? Or are you recommending as per a GP or specialist? Because what may happen is if there's an ongoing list, that list will obviously become longer and longer, and that's maybe necessarily good or bad, but it certainly takes some time to alter regulations if we are to list in this way. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good point. I suppose I recommended using regulation rather than the legislative process because it's a bit more streamlined. But you're quite right that evidence is coming out all the time of the benefits of cannabis in different conditions. And if you look at the clinical, the meta-analysis of the clinical evidence, even from year to year, the evidence is getting stronger. So I think that the committee should take a broad approach, be fairly selective in the definitions that's put in place or recommended put in place, and then allow doctors to kind of apply that in specific circumstances. But I think whatever qualifying conditions you think should apply, I would recommend that they be through regulation rather than in the legislation.
Great, thank you.
Good. Nandor, thank you very much for your, we're actually sort of running short already, very much for your very thoughtful submission here this morning. We'll certainly take on board what you've told us. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Good. Kika, who do we have next? Great, thanks. Stephen Wilkinson.
thing around compassionate for terminally ill, well, it's kind of not where we should go. Yeah. Yeah. Who's the next one? This looks like.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, hi again. We'll just volume up a little bit as it moves through. Stephen, this is Dr. Shane Reti speaking, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning we have MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark and Dr. Liz Craig. Thank you very much for your time this morning. We have read your submission, so please take it as read. We have 5 minutes to be with you. The time is yours. Please go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you. Well, my name is Stephen Wilkinson. I'm actually the president of ATO Legalised Cannabis, but I'm representing just myself. I feel that Labor's amendment to the Misuse of Drugs Act, 1975, and that date alone shows you how our state of the law is, it seems nothing more than an attempt to placate supporters of a bad thought-out election promise. Trying to create a useless bill by making amendments to an outdated, ineffective law, a law that causes more harm than supposedly protects people from pure stupidity. I have no medical background, but to me it's simple to see cannabis could benefit tens of thousands more New Zealanders than the total of terminal patients. I would like to list some things CBD and THC have been proven to be beneficial for, and realise that there are multiple studies to back this list. Cannabis is proven to protect against cancer. It reduces nausea, it reduces pain, it helps with sleeping, it's an antidepressant, it relieves spasms and decreases seizures, it reduces anxiety, it's antimicrobial, it's antibacterial, it's a muscle relaxant, it protects the nervous system, it's anti-diabetic, it relieves cirrhosis, it improves blood circulation, it relieves Crohn's disease, it's anti-inflammatory, it's a bone stimulant, it relieves rheumatoid arthritis, it's antipsychotic, and it's an antitoxin. And like I said, I have no medical background, but I can see how widespread medicinal use would benefit the New Zealand people and reduce the pressure on our already strained health system. All the benefits and uses I have listed can be obtained from using the raw plant. And cannabis is proven to be less toxic than salt and less addictive than sugar. I have been diagnosed with osteoporosis and I have fractured vertebrae and I have constant pain in my spine. My doctor said to me, and I quote, "The best treatment for your pain is cannabis, but I won't write that on your file." So you have a GP recommending cannabis but too scared to push for it officially. They're basically being bullied into submission. We have people all over New Zealand battling with their GPs to have cannabis prescribed. And this is a battle most don't have the energy for, and it's a battle they shouldn't have to do. You have heard from representatives of the medical fraternity, and I asked, well, what do they know about cannabis? Cannabis hasn't been used as a mainstream treatment for over 70 years. The Select Committee should be looking at the American states that have run successful medicinal cannabis models. You've heard from many people who are already using medicinal cannabis who want an affordable, consistent, quality product. But if cannabis was unsafe, where are the hospital admissions for overdose cases? Where are the dead patients? You don't see them because they don't exist. They don't exist because cannabis is safe. A nurse friend and her husband from my town, who are both health nuts, mountain bike fanatics, and they're both definitely anti-cannabis, went for a holiday in Colorado. Because of the debate here in New Zealand, she decided to visit a medicinal cannabis dispensary. And on her return home, she sought me out to tell me how amazed and impressed she was with the operation and is now interested in researching cannabis as a medicine. I'm getting stopped by people in my town, senior citizens, saying to me, they're saying, if cannabis can help, I have no problem with it. So there's a big change in the people's view of cannabis. If I was the committee, I'd be saying to Parliament, I've gone and investigated overseas models. I can see the benefits to New Zealanders and New Zealanders in having a model that allows cannabis, the raw plant, to be used for all conditions that studies have proven it to be beneficial for. But that statement requires testicular fortitude, so it probably won't be said. And for it to happen, cannabis needs to be removed from the Misuse of Drugs Act. Currently, prohibition and to stop the facts of cannabis's medicinal properties becoming a common knowledge. Now, thanks to the internet, normal people are learning of cannabis's medicinal benefits and its safety of use. Now, the genie is out of the bottle. This industry is looking at a multi-billion-dollar loss in profits and now wants a controlling portion of the pie to help it attempt to stop its losses. What we're going to get from it is overpriced products out of the reach of many New Zealanders, and that hurts because when you realise you can attain the same results from the cost of its seed. So are you, as sworn representatives, going to put the welfare of New Zealand citizens ahead of the profit interests of foreign corporations? So please, I ask you, do the right thing and inform your colleagues in Parliament that cannabis needs to be available as a medicine for all, it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be acknowledged as the holistic medicine it is. Thank you very much for your time.
Stephen, this was an excellent submission. Thank you very much. I've been around the table. Your submission is clear, so there are no specific questions. But again, just wanted to thank you very much for a very good submission.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
How do you do that?
Good. Who do we have next? Linda Whyte. Good morning, Linda. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, hi, Linda. This is Dr. Shane Reti speaking, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning we have MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark and Dr. Liz Craig. Thank you very much for your submission. Please take it as read. We have 5 minutes with you. I'll try and give you a heads up as we get close to time, but otherwise, Linda, thanks again. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Linda Whyte, and if you read my submission, you'll know how I've struggled for years with pain, fatigue, brain fog, and inflammation, mainly caused by rheumatoid arthritis. Because of this, I've done a lot of research, and that research tends to indicate to me that cannabis could very well help with my condition. It seems to me that it couldn't possibly affect me any worse than the medications that I'm on already, or have tried and needed to stop because of side effects. I've been told by my doctors as well that I need to get off prednisone, as it is killing me. I believe capital punishment is illegal in this country, so why am I being given a death sentence without even being convicted of any crime? That might sound a bit dramatic, but just the way I feel. Why is it that you allow doctors to diagnose a drug which so far has given me cataracts, diabetes, made me put on 25 kg, and is now causing my teeth to deteriorate, and which they tell me will eventually kill me? Why do you not let them prescribe a herb which has been used as a medicine for centuries and has minimal if any side effects, and which could be the answer that I and many others are looking for? Why do you deny law-abiding citizens the right to self-medicate? And as for cancer, how many of you, as someone close to you, die of cancer? Perhaps, if they had had access to cannabis, they might still be alive, or at least may not have suffered so badly. There is much research showing that this can be the case. The most common complaint on the evidence for treating cancer with cannabis or cannabinoids is that there are not many full-scale clinical trials in humans proving efficacy. However, it must be pointed out that it's really difficult to do these things if it's illegal to administer cannabis to people. There aren't any clinical drug trials of cannabis proving it doesn't treat cancer either. People are dying right now. Simple food or dietary supplement-grade products, of less strenuously refined, but known and safe quantity, that can be produced either commercially or at home without all the shuffle involved at the moment, are all that's needed at the very least to aid in the cancer treatment. Even if the only benefit was an improvement in quality of life, is that not the absolute minimum that should be accepted? Denying patients free and easy access to this remedy, or de facto denial by inability to access or afford the product, on the pedantic grounds of a few percent of impurities and harmless compounds from the herb, would be immoral and a public nuisance. People should have the option. Why, oh why, are we wasting taxpayers' money, our money, and police manpower? Oh, shoot. I've lost where I am. Sorry. Brain doesn't work as well as it used to. Why are we wasting our money and police manpower chasing after cannabis plots and persecuting and prosecuting those who grow the herb? Please look up the ground used to criminalise cannabis way back in 1927. I think you will find that it was based on misinformation, even more so than it's broadcast these days. Wake up. Let those who will use it as a medicine or a relaxant or just to get stoned. Stop wasting resources trying to stop something that won't be stopped, and allow the police to chase the real criminals. And just imagine what the country could do with all the money we are now spending on the various different drugs like the ones I'm on, which are enormously expensive, if cannabis turns out to work just as well, or even better. Anyway, thank you. If you want any questions, I might have a few more seconds left.
Good. Linda, thank you very much for your submission. I'm going to pass the time to Matt Ducey, who has a question.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Very good submission. It's important that we hear from people on the ground. So, look, I can understand your view on, ensuring that we're not wasting government or police resources, and there is some argument around that, but I'm sure you'll agree there are certain groups of the population that we need to ensure protection or exposure, vulnerability. I'm heading towards groups of young people and the like. But where I thought you spoke to the strongest in your submission was around your own experience. So there's a lot of debate around the table about widening it from a terminal illness to chronic pain. Some of the medical profession are saying it would be very hard to determine true chronic pain. I just wonder if you have any views on that. I've noted the first one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have suffered from shingles pain for years and years and years, and I was on tramadol for years and years for that. That's chronic pain, believe you me. My pain threshold used to be really, really high. Now I only need to put my finger on it and go through the roof. Chronic pain, there are always, wherever you go, there are always going to be people who try to cheat the system. But does that mean that those who aren't cheating the system should be penalised?
And the bill as it's currently drafted there's not much detail on the supply side. I mean, what would you advocate for in the sense of the best model for someone in your position to procure medicinal cannabis and how you would define that?
Well, something, probably the easiest way would be for me to grow it, but since I tend to kill it while looking at it, it's not really an option. Having something that's available, like a supplement, 50,000 supplements you get from a chemist. There's vitamins, minerals, and so on. Well, cannabis could be processed in that sort of way, I would imagine, and a capsule or whatever, something. I mean, I don't want to go and get stoned. I just want relief. It just seems that the medical ones that are available, if you can get them, are at a horrendous price. And the cannabis is processed like crazy, but from what I can see, the unprocessed cannabis is actually the one that's best for you. Something that is processed as little as possible, I will, and is easily available that the doctor can prescribe it to people who need it. Paracetamol can kill people. In fact, it does. But you can go and buy that from the chemist as many as you like. Or you can buy it from the supermarket. I know that you can have ambulance for a while.
Understood. Linda, thank you very much for your submission this morning. It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of them have the, it's not till they tell their story that I can link it to their submission.
Good, thank you, Pearl. Can you hear me? Yeah, kia ora, Pearl. Pearl, this is Dr. Shane Reti, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning we have MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark and Dr. Liz Craig. Thank you for your submission this morning. Please take it as read that we have read what you have submitted to us. We have 5 minutes of your time this morning. I'll give you a heads up as we get close. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reti. Kia ora koutou, ko Pearl, Schomburg, Tokaundua, no Tamarunui Aho, kei Tamaki Makaro, Taku Kainga, Anayane. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa.
Namihi kia ora.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. I'm a 65-year-old great-grandmother, as you know by now, medicinal cannabis patient and advocate. It was my wish to stand in front of you today, but due to my poor health and finances, I could not travel. So I implore you to hear my words nonetheless. My dearest friend and fellow patient advocate, Joan Cowie, was meant to be by my side today. Joan and I and many other patients fronted up to media campaigns this last year to show the real face of medicinal cannabis patients in an effort to help break down the negative stereotypes of what a cannabis user looks like and how it enables patients to function better with an improved quality of life. We called for a moratorium on the medicinal cannabis community until the laws were altered as suggested by previous government-appointed commissions. Sadly, Joan passed away recently on the 26th of March. Neither Joan nor I could grow our own plants. This is due to physical disabilities and illness, coupled with our close location to neighbours and regular landlord inspections. This is the case with many chronically sick and dying patients. Our carers and medicine providers help us gain access to cannabis medicine at great risk, and we could not manage without their service and compassion. This bill, in its current state, gave little compassion to my darling friend Joan Cowie, and none to me and the many other sick and slowly dying patients and our supporters. I've spent the last 2.5 years using primarily a range of cannabis products from the black market to treat my inflammatory chronic conditions, PTS symptoms and recovery from surgery. My improved quality of life is remarkable. Without the multitude of pharmaceuticals I used to take, and I and many other folk will always continue to use this wonderful plant in the many useful ways we know of, as folk like us have done for thousands of years of recorded history. I will continue to advocate for this wonderful plant and continue to lobby for its ultimate release from the laws that bond it to criminality. And in the meantime, I and patients all over New Zealand ask you to please extend the statutory defence to all patients suffering from chronic, severe or debilitating conditions, as well as the terminal patients. This will allow patients to continue to access botanical cannabis without fear of prosecution, while standards and regulations are being made to the Act to allow a domestic production to develop, including craft and small producers, and self-provision, which will enable more affordable access than is currently available with the very expensive international products that are unaffordable to most patients. I urge the New Zealand Government and other decision makers to now have the courage to take all necessary steps to urgently reform the laws, uphold the human rights and dignity of our ill and sickest citizens, and help restore our quality of life. Ngā mihi. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Pearl. Thank you very much for sharing with us. I'll move my way around the table. Liz Craig, do you have any questions?
I think it's very clear, actually. You've provided a very nice summary. I guess just one thing that we've been talking to other submitters about is the weighing up what opiates were like in terms of the pain relief versus medicinal cannabis, and whether you found that medicinal cannabis could cover all of the pain relief needs that you had and your friends have had, or did you need to sort of have a mixture of the both to be able to function?
Thank you, Liz. That's a good question. At the end of my darling friend Joan's life, cannabis wasn't much help to her, sadly, and it was a bit of a complicated case. For me, I find I can manage not all of my pain. I still have pain I have to manage, as I do today, but I can get on top of most of it, and with much less side effects than opiates. And with opiates, that didn't get on top of my pain either, as it didn't get on top of Joan's pain.
Thank you.
Pearl, thank you very much for your submission this morning. Very concise. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Good. Mark Patterson. Good morning, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, hi, Mark. This is Dr. Shane Reti speaking, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning are MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren-Clark and Dr. Liz Craig. Thank you for your time this morning. Please take as read the submission that you've sent us. And we have 5 minutes of your time. I'll give you a heads up as we get close, but otherwise, please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, sure. I broke my arm a couple of years ago and quite badly broken. And they prescribed opiate pain relief for quite a while, which made me quite sick. And I do have a friend of mine who smokes cannabis, and he basically tried to get that out. And I noticed that I'm having nausea and throwing up, and it was been a fairly effective pain relief. I just think I've done quite a lot of research on my own, and just from seeing what's happening in other places around the world, and the amount of the drop anyway in alcohol places, craziness and carry on. It just seems odd that that something like that, like alcohol, is like glorified. They sponsor our All Blacks and all that sort of thing, and yet the World Health Organisation has put it at the top of the list of most dangerous drugs. I just find it odd that the most dangerous drug by the World Health Organisation's table is the one that's by it's pretty weird. And what else is happening? Is this a money thing from the alcohol companies, or what happens?
Actually, we're here to actually listen rather than to, by convention, to answer questions. Some of them we do know, some of them we're asking as well, Mark. So we'll actually have to pass it back to you to frame what you'd like us to know.
What you'd like to know? I just think that there's a lot more self-harm reduction kind of stuff. If cannabis was legalised, I'm thinking more decriminalised for people in pain. That's really what I'm after. And I don't think, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of high-ranking policemen, and even they are saying they want to change because it's just taking up so much of their resources. So what I really want to know is, do you think that at any stage there will be change from people with terminally ill to people that have insomnia, anxiety, pain relief, that kind of thing?
So again, that's somewhat unknown to us. That's what we're exploring here, what the scope of the bill is, whether it can be increased or not. What we do know is that this is likely to be the last or the only public consultation to express the view you're expressing. And so my question to you is, are you suggesting that you would like the scope of the bill to be increased? Is that where your questions are heading?
Yes, that's right.
We can see in your submission that you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, which I know that a number of countries around the world, certainly roughly half of the US legislations, also include PTSD as part of their qualifying conditions. Let me pass the time, if I may, to Matt Ducey first of all, and then Angie Warren-Clark for a few questions, Mark.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Mark. So part of the process here is we're trying to talk to as many people on the ground to hear your views about, the bill, where it's going well, where it's not going so well, and we can improve it. So part of the debate around the table at the moment is, this compassionate grounds around terminal illness. Do we widen that around chronic pain? We've heard a lot of people talk about chronic pain as in physical chronic pain. You're actually raising an area that we probably haven't had too many submissions on. So if I understand you rightly, you're saying if it was to be expanded to, say, chronic pain, then you'd like issues such as PTSD to be included in that catch-all bag?
Absolutely, yeah. I just feel that the medication that is provided for PTSD is a lot more harmful. That's just my personal opinion.
And why do you think that medicinal cannabis works effectively for people in that position?
Well, I don't think it works effectively for everyone in that position due to the nature of the illness. But
that's a good point.
I think that it allows. Well, just from my own experience, I had a horrific thing happen to me when I was 12, and I'm still dealing with that. And it just, I don't know, I think medicinal cannabis just gives people space. I think, from my research, gives people space to then perhaps speak more in-depthly with the psychoanalyst or go deeper, or I don't know, it just seems like pills and potions aren't the answer. And my understanding is that cannabis has been illegal for 60 years, but for 50,000 years before that, we used it a long time. I think that can be evidenced by the fact that we have an cannabinoid endocrine system built in.
Okay, hey, thank you for your views today. It's been much appreciated, mate.
Thank you, Mark. Last question, Angie Warren-Clark.
This is following on from Matt Ducey's question, just around psychiatric conditions. Do you think it would be useful to have a list of psychiatric conditions, or do you think it would be wide enough to put the scope as saying something like depression, anxiety, or other psychiatric conditions?
I think we have to be quite careful and make a kind of list. I mean, I don't think giving cannabis to someone with schizophrenia would be a particularly good idea. And I don't think, like a lot of brain injuries or anything, wouldn't be that good. I do know that that some people, not all, some with anxiety do get relief from it rather than benzodiazepines or SSRIs. And I think it's just the fact that humanity's had it all along since the dawn of time, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, and no one's really kind of died. So what I'm thinking is, I would be thinking of a list, which would have to be researched by mental health professionals, and then have a look at our American counterparts and see what's happening there.
Hey, and thank you, Mark, for bringing up about post-traumatic stress disorder. As Matt said, this has been the first time that's been raised.
Yeah, I think that's from a mental health perspective. I think that's one of the big ones. That's my thoughts and my reading on it.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and we'll take on board what you've told us.
Okay, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks again.
Okay, bye.
Very good. Do we have Tony Randle here? Thank you, Tony. If you'd like to approach the table. Hi, please have a seat. Good. Well, welcome, Tony. You've seen the format, and we've introduced ourselves during the morning. We have your submission in front of us. We have read it, so the time is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your time. My submission talks about Jane, who's a very close relative I'm taking care of, but for privacy reasons, I don't want to.
Thank you.
Jane has cancer. She has terminal cancer with an 18-month prognosis at the moment. She cannot take standard anti-nausea medication. By trial and error, and in hospital, we've found only 2 legal painkillers work: fentanyl and Panadol. Obviously, it's fentanyl, which is a very powerful opioid, takes the heavy lift of dealing with her pain. But it does have, as we've found, again, by doing it, serious effects if it's taken beyond the current levels. So she's sort of managing. She's not well, but she's managing and she's doing things. But she's at the limit of what she can do. Medical marijuana has been suggested by a palliative doctor, but she hasn't yet been interested in that. However, as outlined in my submission, chronic pain is in her future, and it's both from cancer and from arthritis. She can't take anti-arthritis medicine because it speeds up her cancer. She's in a rock and a hard place. I have a real problem with the bill, because the bill is for the terminally ill, it says, but it's for the terminally ill who have less than a year to live. Does this mean that Jane, who's trying to maximise her life, has to go and prove she's less than a year to live? I'm not talking about the medical diagnosis. I'm talking about the fact that every day she wakes up with the realisation she's going to die. Sorry. And she's trying to maximise her life. And this process is going to demand of her, she fronts and convinces people she's less than a year to live when she's trying to live as long as she can. It just seems cruel to deny a dying person any medication that helps her quality of life while she's better, while she still can travel, while she can still do some of the things that she hasn't done yet within the very short time that's left. I think that the chronic pain thing, that anyone in chronic pain should have access to all of the possible remedies that are safe and medically acceptable. But seriously, having a time limit on those who are essentially condemned to die really must go. I mean, such people need every help to maximise what they've got left, because it's a truly tragic thing that she won't see her grandchildren. She won't see how things turn out. And today, the cruelty is that she's not allowed access to it. I would hope and ask that you accept those positions, and that anyone who stands up and says, oh no, the 1 year limit must stay, would think about those beyond the limit who will be in pain and are still to die, because it's just unacceptable, and I think it's not really what the spirit of being a New Zealander is about. Okay, thank you.
Tony, this was an excellent submission. Thank you for sharing what I understand are very personal experiences and observations. Medical professionals and others have also raised the question of how do we know, what is the solidness, the robustness to 12 months? Who can predict? How can we tell? We asked the NZMA exactly that question. Can your practitioners guarantee with some certainty that someone will have 12 months or less? So we share some of the uncertainty around that cut-off point as well. I'll pass the questions. Matt Ducey, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's just following on from that point, really, is, you know, facetiously as an opposition MP, it gives me no pleasure to say that things can be done better, but the reality is in the select committee process is exactly what we're here to do. So at least we've got a line in the sand, and then if we do our job arguably right, then we have a bill that's introduced in the first reading, it comes to the select committee, we kick it round a bit, we get feedback, very important feedback from people like you who have real stories to tell that actually illuminate what's really pretty much a dry process of writing a bit of text for law. So hopefully we can make a case that seems, for me, quite pragmatically right. Why would you put a date on a terminal illness? From your from James' experience, how pragmatically can someone evidence that they've been diagnosed as terminally ill? I'm just thinking if someone was to challenge that, because in the end we're not saying we will make it legal for them to use cannabis. It's a compassionate arrangement, and albeit a gap filler. So how would someone be able to prove that?
Well, I really don't. I'm not a medical person, and I don't know what the boundary of someone being terminally ill and not terminally ill is, so I can't really comment on that. It's clear, essentially what we were told, because when we found the cancer, of course, we tried to treat it. And the basic rule, it seems to me, is if the cancer is contained within the organ, then it can be attacked. But if it's spread elsewhere, then the ability of the chemotherapy to actually make it go back is very unlikely. We were told it was not possible. So it was clear cut that she's going to die. The pain part is a particular issue because it's spread to the pain centre in her back. There's this particular medical term which I don't understand, but apparently the nerves come out that will support the gut, and the cancer spread into there. So she's had radiotherapy to knock that back, but, you know, it's not gone, and it's going to keep coming back. You know, the real thing I wanted to put on the table is that when you've given a terminal illness, you want to maximise your life, and that's the period that's not 1 year from dying. And if she needs the pain medication that medical marijuana would give her so that she can still travel, that she can do stuff, she might have 2 years, 3 years. I'm hoping for 3 years. I'm hoping for 2 years. I want her mental attitude to say, you've got 2 years to go. Not 1 year, not saying, I've got less than 1 year. So it's that time, it's that window that they say, go and do the things as much as you can. Go and see your relatives. Go and make your peace. Go and make your arrangements. That's when you need the pain meds. Because when you are within a year, you could be in hospital and you've got all sorts of other things that they can do. Okay? And that's why it's important to take that limit off. It's for quality of life. It's for maximising what you've got for someone under death sentence. That is the point. It's like, the nearest parallel I would say is, someone condemned to death, would you starve them? In addition to them being condemned to death? No, it seems like extra thing. That's the point of the limit. It's not, are you definitely going to die? I don't know that. Not in my case. Jane does not have that choice to have someone certain. That would be actually better, because then we could get extra treatment or travel to Mexico or something. No.
Tony, thank you for your submission. Thank you for sharing. We're sorry for your challenge, and we've certainly taken on board what you've told us this morning.
Thank you.
Do we have Sue Gray in the room, please? Thank you, Sue. Please come to the table. You'll need to speak with the clerks whether we're able to accommodate that. Do you have something for us?
I've got an open letter from some doctors who they've asked me to put it forward as well.
Could you give it to the clerk and they'll distribute it to us?
I've got that's enough copies for the members. I can give you some more.
Good. Thank you, Sue. Well, welcome to the Health Select Committee. You've seen the format this morning. Our names are visible on the table. We have 5 minutes with you again. Thank you for joining us. The time is yours. Please go ahead, Sue.
Kia ora, I'm Sue Gray. I'm a lawyer based in Nelson. I've qualified in science, law and environmental management and risk assessment. I specialise in complicated emerging issues involving often law, science, policy and now medicine involving medicinal cannabis. I've been going through the same type of inquiry that you're now going through for the last 3 or 4 years as a result of clients seeking my help. I speak in support of Rose Renton, Victoria Davis, Rebecca Reider and the many other New Zealanders who have made submissions or who are here in spirit but are too sick to appear themselves. I appear for Helen Kelly, Tom Harris, Joan Cowley and Alex Renton, who died waiting for a more compassionate law. And I speak for the many New Zealand judges, or at least acknowledge the New Zealand judges who have dismissed charges against medicinal cannabis users. In some cases, the judges have almost been in tears, listening to the choices defendants have faced between upholding the law and their own health and well-being. It's a horrible, horrible choice for people to have to make. And hearing how New Zealanders have faced police search warrants, having their homes ripped apart, having their medicines seized, their privacy lost, their employment lost, their prospects lost, and in many cases facing jail. And it's still happening. I'm still getting numerous calls every week from sick people who have had the police visit their homes and take their medicine. This matter's urgent. The World Health Organization and many, many states around the world recognise the benefit of the cannabinoids in stabilising the human endocannabinoid system. The science is no mystery. It's well established, it's well researched in Israel, throughout America where it's legal. The issue is that the decision makers haven't been given that information and the doctors haven't been given that information. I've given you a letter this morning which was written at a recent medical conference a couple of weeks ago. It's an open letter to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Health and a number of New Zealand health professionals
They're asking for education for medical profession on the endocannabinoid system and safe, affordable access to cannabis for their patients. They've asked me to give the letter because they're afraid of bullying in the medical system if they stand up with their own names and make a stand individually. It's a really serious situation because the doctors on the ground, especially many of the GPs, are getting information, evidence every day from their patients who are using cannabis effectively, but they're concerned because they haven't been educated on it, because there's a blockage in the system that means that they're not getting taught what they need to know except from their patients. And I acknowledge the brave doctors Dave Porter, Graham Gilbranson and almost Dr. Tori Catherwood, who did have the curiosity to learn and did seek remedies for their patients and speak out. I think you're hearing from most, if not all of them today. The current laws are not working. People who are suffering physical, mental pain will seek help from wherever they can get it. If they can't get a product legally, they'll get it illegally. We have to draw a line, I understand that. There are risks with anything. But at the moment, the line is drawn in the wrong place, because the line is making good, law-abiding citizens act illegally instead of facilitating the law and the line to be in the right place where a democratic society would expect that line to be drawn. I've got a really interesting dilemma. I'm here today advocating that hemp should be legalised because it's safe. It's been used for 4,000 years, and it's simply but we start on the assumption that it's dangerous until it can be proven safe. It's been used for 4,000 years by great civilizations all over the world. And on the other hand, I'm in the Court of Appeal next month arguing that poisons should be treated as being dangerous, because the starting assumption for poisons is somehow that they're safe until they can be proven to be dangerous. There is a problem with the assumptions. The problem is not with the science or the evidence, it's a problem with the starting assumptions. My submission is that it's time for a paradigm change. Let's put the public interest ahead of the interest of the corporates who have been controlling decision making. The police and the judges are doing their best with the laws that they've got, but there's massive, massive injustice on the way through the process. And I've put in my written submission some examples of some of the different scenarios. A client who was on the run, I think, from memory, 19 years, facing drug charges after horrendous upbringing and serious post-traumatic stress. A client who became addicted to opioids after 27 years of medical misadventure, and opioids were given to her, then stopped overnight. She hasn't got any medical choices apart from cannabis if she can legally access it. There are a client who's facing charges, he's got a terminal illness but probably not going to die within a year, and like the gentleman who spoke before about Jane, the last thing he wants to do is admit to himself that he's going to die within a year and get his doctor to write that down for him. How cruel is that? Cannabinoids offer a remarkable solution for an array of conditions based on the endocannabinoid system. We have an endocannabinoid system. Most of us don't make enough these days for the stresses of 21st century life. We can supplement it with a plant that props up our system. It's a natural remedy. If we applied the same logic to the hemp plant and the cannabis plant that we're applying to a whole range of other medications and foods, apples would be illegal, milk would be illegal, cheese would be illegal, blueberries would be illegal, it would all be illegal because they may have some product that's perhaps harmful. At some point we have to say there's enough evidence to actually do what common sense dictates, listen to the evidence of all of these people and the many others you're hearing from. That is all evidence of benefit. Listen to what the rest of the world's doing, listen to what the World Health Organization is doing, and make a stand. Have courage to make a stand. It's a hard job in your shoes, and I understand that. You're listening to all kinds of submissions. But you are the very people. You are the choice New Zealanders that can make a difference for all of these other thousands and thousands of people, and they're depending on you to do it. I should be redundant from my work on medicinal cannabis because everything is fixed with a law reform. The people who are waiting to grow up, the families, the farmers, the iwi who want to grow cannabis in their garden, their farms, let them do it. Let them grow a sustainable crop, listen to all the evidence and make the changes that we need. In relation to the question you've been asking about with how to change the current wording on terminal illness, most submissions at Meadsley is so much wider. If somebody is sick and there's a relatively safe solution that can help them, why would we not let them use that? So if a doctor thinks that a patient can benefit from cannabis for any medical condition, terminal, chronic pain, from a mental condition, post-traumatic stress, whatever it is, they've gone to the doctor, they've asked for advice. If there's a solution there, let the doctor and the patient decide the solution. We had the Dame Sylvia Cartwright inquiry 30 years ago saying that health should be for doctors and their patients. Let's do something to implement the outcome of that.
Sue, can you take a few questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Good, thank you. Liz, I'll pass to you first. Do you have any questions?
Okay.
Good. Angie?
No questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Nate?
Yeah. I could probably ask it. There won't be a conflict of interest. I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. Your argument is persuasive, but I suppose is there any unintended consequences when the medical fraternity is the gatekeeper and then assumes or feels pressure to give the patient what they want, irrespective of it is the efficacy, if it's going to be the best medication to use? And I suppose that was the concern if we look at the Chloe Schomburg bill that got voted down in the House, that if we were going to allow people to grow, have the ability to grow their own once the medical profession had deemed them as they could go forth, where that left potentially, gangs, criminal activity. So you're opening that up. I'm not saying I agree with that or either, but that is, I'm sure you've heard of that. So how do you work through that?
Look, I actually think it's a solution rather than a problem. If people can access what they need with medical advice, they've got much more chance of going to a doctor and much less chance of going through the black market. In terms of where they get it from, there's numerous ways it can be done. Chloe's bill, in my view, was actually had some good solutions. There are plenty of good models overseas. The current problem is more of a risk to the doctors in prescribing a product unless it's got all the medical ticks and balances. That can be avoided by letting hemp being sold as a food or letting cannabinoid products be sold as dietary supplements just as you buy vitamins and other products. So by removing the legal barriers, I believe the problem will sort itself out. Who would go and buy it from a gang if they can buy it from the chemist or grow their own? It actually fixes the problem.
Yeah. And I suppose running through the broad principles of medications going through MedSafe, are we at risk, in your view, of ending up in a situation where their classifications draws a line in the sand where people say, oh, that just removes the accessibility, I'll just go and carry on growing it myself and not staying within that medical overview?
Look, after all my research, my view is that the medical model needs to shift to fit the needs of the people rather than the people shifting to fit an outdated medical model that is failing all around us on every level. We can't afford the medical model we've got. If we can find some solutions that actually let people take responsibility for their own health, where they can discuss with their doctors to come up with a solution that keeps them off opioids and other harmful products, isn't that a great thing? Pharmac, I've done a whole series of OIAs on this. Treasury response. The biggest expense of medical cannabis at the moment is the cost of enforcing the bad law. That came out a couple of years ago from Bill English's office. I've done another OIA from Pharmac. Hundreds of millions of dollars would be saved if people can access cannabis products lawfully without having to because they will use those instead of the opioids, but not just the opioids, then all the other products they have to take to deal with all the side effects of the opioids. That's not even taking into account just the wellness and the health benefits for people of then not being sick all the time, but actually feeling good and not having a foggy brain and all the things that go with it. And their caregivers. If you look at the multiplier effect of going back to basics, what do we actually want to achieve here? Why don't we want a happy, healthy, well population and then adjust the law accordingly? It solves so many problems.
This is a very good submission. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll read what you've sent us. Thank you. Can you call Rose Renton to the table, please? Good morning, Rose.
Good morning.
Hi, thank you for joining us this morning. You've seen the format for how we conduct the Select Committee. You can see all our names around the table. We have 5 minutes with you. The time is yours. We'll try and leave some time for questions. Please proceed.
Lovely. Kia ora, Select Health Committee. Thank you for listening. Many New Zealanders know my personal story. My 19-year-old son, Alex Renton, was first in New Zealand to use a cannabis medicine in a hospital environment in June 2015 after 43 toxic drugs failed to change his status epilepticus. Alex died on the 1st of July 2015, bringing with it a wave of reform that has us united here today. Cannabis reform is not new to New Zealanders. Campaigners have been ignored for longer than my lifetime. I am here today to continue our message until Parliament hears, not just listens to its people. How does medicinal cannabis look? Well, we've heard a lot of this morning. That is how medicinal cannabis looks, and I will just pass that round so each one of you can see.
Thank you.
What it looks like. These organic, New Zealand-made, non-toxic products have an affordable price tag and change lives overnight. And these are high in CBD or rich CBD, trace THC. They are not products designed to get people stoned. They are chronic long-term pain users. Pharmaceutical cannabis. And this is a real eye-opener for anyone who's sick. $660 a month for a Tilray CBD-only product, no THC, versus $65 a month for a hemp seed-infused rich CBD organic New Zealand grown cannabis. That's shocking. And when I shared that on Facebook, my phone really hasn't stopped since. My point in bringing that here today is to show why we're all gathered here, because we cannot afford the pharmaceutical style. Long-term chronic health conditions that mainstream medicine cannot relieve. Crohn's, lupus, fibro, insomnia, depression, MS, arthritis, migraines, epilepsy, cancer, Parkinson's, emphysema, anxiety, restless legs, cramp, an endless list that benefits from medicinal cannabis without the toxic side effects. Whole raw plant, the entourage effect. I ask you to look that up, please. It's vital. It's a vital link to understanding the power of this 4,000-year-old medicine. Isolated CBD or THC is a waste of resource, time and money, your people's money. I face up to 14 years in a jail for producing, growing and supplying rich CBD, trace THC plants and products to sick, chronic, long-term patients with doctor and specialist endorsement, meaning they come to me through their specialist or through their GP. Will our justice system convict and jail me for doing an urgent, long, overdue job, New Zealanders at the end of their tether, suffering in endless pain without sleep or quality of life? I'm not a dealer. I'm a lay healer, and I do not sell raw cannabis. My patients are retired, chronically ill, and suffering in a broken, outdated medical system. Compassion is missing for our people. Most have worked their entire life, paid taxes, and now ask for access to a plant that gives them a quality of life and relief from their pain. Our doctors are not informed, trained or supported by our government, leaving them unable to support their patients. This is immoral on a government's part, on your part. Our police force are not informed, trained or supported to know the clear difference between medicinal cannabis and dealers. Our youth are not informed about the medicinal side of this incredible healing herb, cannabis. Actually, they are. In an outdated 2014 government supplied, this is what cannabis looks like, which is all about tinnies, 50s, all it's a bit scungy really. I don't want my teenager learning that that is what cannabis looks like, because it isn't how cannabis looks. That's for dealers, that's dangerous. But that is not the view of medicinal cannabis in New Zealand. And that's what we're teaching our youth. So the youth aren't informed yet. Alcohol is promoted in sports socially every day, accessible in supermarkets, and the harms of this acceptable drug is mind-blowing if you read the statistics. We are convicting our best growers and healers, and we will not go away. We will only become louder. We request lay healers or green fairies, as we've been tagged, endorsed by qualified doctors or specialists, are protected from persecution, prosecution, for supplying sick patients with medicinal cannabis. And we request homegrown rights with an affordable licence to register these sick patients with medical cards confirming these facts. And I have a Māori proverb here. Iaha te mea nui o te ao. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is the people. It is the people. It is the people. Thank you.
Rose, thank you. Thank you very much for that submission. We'll pass to Liz. Do you have any questions?
I think it was a very insightful presentation. Just looking at some of the recommendations in terms of greater education for the medical profession in particular, what would you think that needs to be included in that whole
Sue Gray briefly covered the endocannabinoid system. I think that's what's lacking most without medical training. Tori Catherwood, a medical student, has just returned from 6-week placement in California, where she worked with Dr. David Bierman, a medicinal cannabis expert, and he is a part of an international group that educate doctors. So our own government could support doctors to be a part of that group, so at least they're kept up to date with international findings. There's medical papers. There's one in the New England Medical Journal printed late last year about the use of CBD in intractable epilepsy, which has obviously got my heart after what happened with Alex. So the evidence is there. I just think you need to gather the international evidence and use the doctors that are at the front here in New Zealand and want to know, and use them to work together and network internationally, which can be done so easily. But it's the endocannabinoid system that answers so many of these doctors' questions.
That was a very, very good submission. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll take on board what you told us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could call Rebecca Reider to the table, please. Hello, Rebecca. Hiya, good morning. You've been sitting in, Rebecca, so you've seen the format and how we conduct the select committee, so welcome. We have 5 minutes of your time. The time is yours. If you're able to leave questions, that would be good. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First, I want to address, because there have been so many questions coming up about a list of qualifying conditions. As you can hear from my accent, I'm from a continent across the world. So I'm from the States. In some states there are lists of qualifying conditions that are quite long. They vary from state to state. In some states, like where I'm from, California, there's not a list. It's just doctors can prescribe. In Canada, there's not a list. It's just doctors can prescribe. Beware that if you create a specific list of qualifying conditions, you may end up leaving some patients out, because as you've heard, the endocannabinoid system is the largest neurotransmitter system in the human body. That's why cannabis works for so many conditions, so please be careful. Now, you've heard a lot of scientific type discourse, so actually I wrote you guys a poem. Imagine you're sitting on your porch, eating your lunch on a sunny spring day, when 3 policemen walk up the steps and say, you have the right to remain silent. Imagine they're waving a warrant to comb through your home, your medicine cabinet. Well, I don't have to imagine, because that was me. That was my name atop a charge sheet saying this government could imprison me up to 9 years because cannabis was my pain relief. 9 years? I'd spent a decade lying on my back, desperate and full body pain that 20 doctors couldn't figure out how to curb, and a simple herb eased the ache. 9 years? I lasted 15 minutes in the Nelson Courthouse basement, locked in a cage, until I was banging on the glass, begging for someone to come get me because I couldn't actually sit on the metal stool comfortably. After 3 court dates and nearly $2,000 in legal fees for the best lawyer in town, a judge did let me go. But he convicted another medicinal user on the very same day. And this bill on your desks would allow those police officers to come back to my house and do it all again. The first pills the doctors gave me didn't touch the pain. Just glued my body to the bed sheets. When I tried to get off those pills, I couldn't remember how to sleep. The second pill they gave me didn't touch the pain, just pulsed suicidal thoughts through my brain. Then the doctor said, whoa, get off it slower, you might have seizures. Gabapentin. The third pill helped a bit, but when I tried to get off it, I got panic attacks so bad I couldn't leave the house for weeks. Duloxetine. And all these were legal prescriptions given to me like candy. Legal. The gentlest, most effective medicine for me was the one that landed the police at my door. Cannabis released the spasms in my back. Cannabis soothed the anxiety that those pharmaceuticals gave me. Cannabis put me to bed softly when sleep had slipped away, let me wake with muscles relaxed and rejuvenated, able to face another day. So why is it illegal? Very quick history lesson. Thank one U.S. government bureaucrat who led the charge aggressively. In 1937, he testified to the U.S. Congress, quote, "This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes." Watch out. Now things over there have swung back. Last year I visited the States where I was born, got my doctor's authorization, walked into a licensed dispensary where I was able to choose from an optimal range of herbal medicines to choose the ones best for me. So I could get cannabis oils to relax my body deeply at night. I could get the raw, dried herb itself in different strains for different symptoms that I could use for quick relief during the day. I could choose my ideal ratios of THC and CBD, and patients there are free to grow their own. Because it's actually comparatively safe. And since it's been re-legalized as a medicine in the States, medical costs and opioid prescriptions in those states have consistently decreased. So this bill before you, in its current form, offers me little relief. The Minister of Health himself says there wouldn't be any commercial cannabis products available for years. Documents already released reveal that the Ministry of Health regulators are looking to copy Australia, which has had this corporate-focused failure. Right now, only 300 patients there have legal access, and others are still being arrested. Is that the law you want here? That's the bill that's sitting before you. An exemption only for terminal illness? What about those serving life sentences in bodies that don't cooperate? Please fix this. Please extend the statutory defense to every patient with a debilitating condition and their doctor's recommendation, as well as our chosen caregivers, to possess and to grow our own. Because where else are we going to get it? This move will take empathy. But it's no huge leap to say, someone you love may need it one day. Someone you love in these fragile bags of skin we call home may suffer and come to be a common criminal like me. You have the power to ensure that not one more sick person is locked in that courthouse basement cell. Pain is a prison enough on its own. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We're just trying to be well.
Rebecca, this was a very good submission. Thank you very much. We have written what you've submitted to us, and we'll also take on board what you've told us this morning. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences with us. Thank you. We'll now call Shane Brun to the table, please.
Back for more.
Just make a bit of room for my wife.
Sure. Is that Kat?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi Kat.
Sorry,
Yeah.
still getting used to it.
No trouble. Well, look, welcome to you both. You've seen the format, and of course we've met in a different format as well. So welcome. The time is yours. Please go ahead.
So thank you for having us here again to talk about this issue at a personal level this time, with much less of the high-level detail. Now, I started on this purely for my wife with an immense amount of suffering. And although I would consider myself a polar opposite politically to Rose Renton, we're going about things very differently, but we want the same thing. But there are other things that I have done that I haven't shared, which I'd like to share today. Out of desperation, but considering I became the pinnacle of knowledge on legal access, in 2016 I was responsible for 80% of the non-pharmaceutical approvals under the pathway. I had some seeds arrive in my letterbox unsolicited, and they were all labelled up nicely what strains they were. And many of them were actually strains that were 1-to-1 ratio, so they were effectively Sativex in plant form. A couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from Helen Kelly, and she joked, "Did you get any nice surprises in the mail lately?" I'm not saying it was her directly, but one of the Green Fairies perhaps that she had contact with because had arranged it. So anyway, after I got Tilray approved for the first few patients, and then I had these seeds, and I'd given up all hope, and I took it upon myself to cultivate for my wife. We had a few plants. There's no denying that. The police counted 20 plants, and they came when we weren't home, and they were about a month from harvest. They were in a greenhouse out the back, sealed and fairly opaque sheeting, so I thought I was safe. Clearly I wasn't. And they took it all. And the direct consequence of that now is that was going to be a year's supply of a responsible medicine, and if anyone knows how to use it responsibly, it'd be me. And that gave us hope for my wife to be free of the horrible drug methadone. As I spoke in the MCAN submission, methadone in Canada is a fourth-line treatment for nerve pain. Cannabis is third line. So once we get over the fact this is cannabis and actually put it in the evidence system, Kat would have qualified. But they took it all, and the end result of that, Kat's 14 weeks pregnant, and our next child's going to have to go through opioid withdrawals, and we've already had that for our first, and that's on the police. In the police forms and stuff that they wrote, we had a very good lawyer, who's probably still here somewhere. It's a bit of a theme in Nelson. He's a very excellent lawyer. They clearly knew nothing about cannabis. They accepted it wasn't for dealing, but they said there was far too much for one person, but they didn't take into account variables like, it's in a sealed greenhouse, it's going to get mouldy, and I'm going to end up throwing half of it away. And they just had no clue, and they jointly charged us, which is almost unheard of. Kat wrote a statement saying that the cannabis was for her, but she never admitted to cultivating. She couldn't physically anyway. Because we live on the back of a hill and it's up a steep slope. And they jointly charged her, and the only way reason I think they could do that was to get me to play ball and confess early. I was very confident with the backing of an excellent lawyer who got another woman off for cultivating 62 plants. was very confident if I got to court, I'd walk out with a discharge without conviction. But they jointly charged her, and she was suspended from her course that she'd been battling to do for 8 years for a bachelor's degree. She then lost her job, and they had no intention of following through on it. The intent was for me to plead diversion, and they withdraw charges against her upon the completion of my diversion. So for several weeks, I had to send Kat away on the weekends because I wasn't in a position to care for her while I was making up the community service hours to finish diversion. It's very rare for the police to do joint charges like that when someone confesses and say, hey, it was all me. And the only reason I can think is they didn't want us to go through the courts mid-last year. It would have been terribly embarrassing for them. I was denied the opportunity to go to court because they were holding her life to ransom by jointly charging her when they had a full confession from me. So I finish with the fact that we've got some very big disparities on the criminal justice system. If Sue Gray can get a woman discharged, an old white woman, discharged for 62 plants, and we can get diversion for 20, just last week there was a Brown brother in Wanganui, he only had 8 plants and he got a conviction in 80 hours community work. So we have this huge disparity in the criminal system around medical cannabis, and some judges will say medical's a defence and others will just throw the book at you. So the only way to fix that is to get it into the law. We have this terminal defence that you're putting forward, but it doesn't go far enough. And we're talking about severe or debilitating, which is something I have quite the fancy for. The Ministry of Health already has a non-pharmaceutical application scheme, and it has criteria, and the first criteria is severe or life-threatening. If it's good enough for the Ministry of Health and the doctors, it's good enough for the police and the courts to apply a similar criteria. We don't need a list of conditions because it's going to be too big. One of the main Canadian manufacturers supplies medical cannabis for 168 different conditions. So unless you fancy compiling a list that big, the best thing to do would be to define severe. There will be issues with equity around the blurry edges. Chronic pain is the duration of pain, not the intensity. I'm arguing for people that are stuck on methadone and oxy, not those with a bit of arthritis using ibuprofen. So if we have severe conditions, you get a robust definition and criteria. It can be done because it's not what society wants. It's for people like us who are otherwise law-abiding to be hauled before the courts. And the police are quite smug about it too. And the typical patient now, well, many of the patients have an attitude to the police that's unhealthy. It'd be reminiscent of the rapper Ice Cube circa 1988, which wouldn't be good to say in a select committee process. But it's really not healthy, and these people are otherwise law-abiding citizens. I used to work with the police when I was in the army, and now I'm on the receiving end, and it comes full circle just through health reasons.
Jane, I'm sharing the time here, submission time with Kat. If Kat would like to speak.
I've got my own spot.
But we're actually into that spot now, so you're welcome to if you'd like to.
So I've lived with some form of pain since the age of 10, starting with endometriosis and not being diagnosed until I was 18, having multiple days, weeks off school, losing a lot of time, having to repeat fifth form. A few months after our wedding at 21, I slipped on ice at work and prolapsed L4, L5, L5S1, causing my nerves to become compressed in my lower back. This meant I couldn't complete my job that I loved, and nothing has compared since. I love working with kids, and now I'm unable to because I suffer too much pain. It took so long to get ACC to agree to surgery that I now have a central sensitization disorder. That means all my nerves are constantly affected by vibrations, bright lights, loud noises. Can you imagine going away on a weekend with your partner or family and not being able to sleep because you're uncomfortable in someone else's bed? That you've spent thousands at home to buy a bed that you can actually sleep in. You've already heard the list of medications from my husband when he came and spoke for MCANs. How's that fair for somebody who's 22 to have to try that many medications and live a life stuck inside, not being able to go out with their friends, too scared to have people over for dinner because what would they think of you sitting on the couch completely stoned out of your head by legal prescriptions? I have years of my life that I can't remember. I'm now a mother, and I had to watch my son go through withdrawals from methadone, and I blame myself because I couldn't get off the pain relief because I was in so much pain. If you have kids, then you'll know that for a woman, carrying a baby is a lot of weight on their pelvis and back. At 29 weeks, I was flown to Dunedin and transferred from fentanyl patches to methadone. And since then, I've had to fight to get off the methadone every single day because I started losing my teeth. My teeth started disintegrating because of the mix of the medication and saliva in my mouth. At 29 now, I've had to have so much dental work in the last 2 years in comparison since I was 18, and it's just because of this. All the side effects of coming off medications that I've been forced to try, being locked away in rooms at hospitals because you're bawling your eyes out in agony and nobody wants to help you with pain. Instead, they say that it's all in your head and you're going crazy. They put you on antipsychotics because the pain relief isn't working and it should have been enough to put a horse down. It got to a stage where only ketamine would help. When I first found out I was pregnant, I was on a fentanyl drug mixed with ketamine. So my son had already been exposed, there was nothing I could do. And I was getting better. I managed to cut down my pills until I slipped again going through the back door, and that was the end of it. I just haven't recovered since, and my medication just seems to keep rising and keep rising. Until the first time someone gave me some cannabis to try. First time I slept 4 hours straight, no waking, no rolling over, no pain, no nothing. Waking up going, what's the time? Next time my husband watched and witnessed the fact that I was able to get up off the couch and walk around and cook dinner.
Instead of calling an ambulance, we knocked on the neighbour's door and asked for some cannabis because she had a similar spine injury. And we watched a movie. She ate a bit too many corn chips. We had a good conversation, and she slept better that night than I'd seen her sleep ever, since the injury. And her mood was better for 2 days afterwards, just from having a really restorative sleep.
So I put to you, the side effects of cannabis may be being a bit hungry, opposed to watching your life disappear in front of you. So when Shane spoke about the cops, I'd come home because I was in pain. I couldn't work. I had to come home. I walked in and my house was a mess, and there was a letter on the bench saying that we'd just been raided. I lost everything, and I don't know if you can understand what that meant to me because I had already fought so hard to get to where I was in my degree. And I thought I would never be able to work again, and I may not, but I lost my course, I lost my job, and I had to fight for everything else. I finished my degree and I graduated this year, but that was no thanks to the cops. Because that time I had to make up for myself, which is really hard when you can't think. Imagine your brain being zapped because you'd gone off a medication that you've been given, saying it would help. I just don't think it's fair that you can compare these drugs that they can give you so freely, yet something so natural can just make you, live a little bit sleepy and hungry.
It's really hard that in the Misuse of Drugs regulations, Section 22 means that medicinal cocaine is still easier to prescribe than medicinal cannabis. We've got some really big equity issues.
So now I have to watch another baby. I have to give it morphine on its day 2 of its life because the cops took my only chance of getting off methadone and having a baby without withdrawals. And do you think it's fair that I just don't have kids because I'm being given drugs that would affect them? Why should we have to stop our lives and growing our family, giving our son a sibling? It's just not fair.
Look, thank you very much for sharing a lot of very personal experiences and observations. We have your written submissions. Again, we feel sorry for your challenge, for both of your challenges. Thank you very much for your submissions. We will take on board what you have told us here today and try and weave in the best possible route that we can possibly find. So thank you for sharing with us this morning. Could we call Michelle Tweedie to the table, please? Good morning, Michelle.
Morning.
Hello.
Good afternoon, I believe.
Yes, it is. You've seen the format. We've introduced ourselves. You have 5 minutes. We've read your submission, so please go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Inkster, by the way.
Yeah, hello. How are you?
Michelle's partner.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yep. And the lady you see before you today is not the lady a few years ago. So at the age of 15, Michelle started getting migraines, and she's had them ever since. And over a period of time, she became chronic and very severe with them. And when Michelle was at rock bottom, she was on addictive prescription medications for her migraines that were rebounding. And at that stage, we didn't know they were rebounding or addictive. And so in short, the medication she was using to help with the migraines was causing more migraines. She averaged 26 migraines a month for 18 months. And they usually started at 4 a.m. in the morning. And I used to get up and help her with the medications. And several times she pleaded with me to take her life. With tears streaming down her face, the pain was so unbearable for her living her life. She was barely existing. We did so many trips to doctors after our surgeries. I've simply lost count how many times I've been there. Michelle was physically and mentally in breakdown. She lost a lot of weight, and this was all due to the withdrawing from the addictive medication she was on at that stage. We've tried so many different drugs and therapies. Michelle's got a bit of a list of what we can remember that she's tried.
And that's not all of it. That's just what I could remember.
And there's not to mention it was a huge financial toll on us as well. However, today life is quite different, as you can see. Michelle has a life back. And we didn't have time to wait for this bill to come in. I'd like to pass over to Michelle now.
Good afternoon, Select Committee. Now, migraine is a very complex disease, and this is what I would often hear from my doctors, my specialists, and I would often leave the doctor's surgery with no answers. They couldn't help me. They didn't know what to do. So in all honesty, unless someone has experienced a migraine or witnessed what they can do to you, then you will not fully understand how debilitating they can be. Now, migraine is the 3rd most common disease in the world, and it's the 7th most disabling. And I have spent hundreds of hours of research. In recent years, it's been on cannabis, CBD oil, epilepsy, and I had contact with the Stanley brothers in Colorado. And this was to talk to them about Charlotte's Web oil, which has been helping the epilepsy children. And with this oil, it is high CBD, THC, and this is very important. Straight hemp, I have been informed, is not good enough when you're dealing with such a condition. Now, migraines are actually indeed a seizure of the brain. So with this, they are getting great results with people also with migraine. So I went to my doctor to ask for the CBD oil and was told it's not indicated for migraine. But in the same mouthful, I was asked if I would like to take an anti-seizure drug. With this, I declined as I looked at all the side effects with this drug, and I have already been put through the ringer, well and truly. It took me 2 years to detox off an addictive prescription drug, and in that time I nearly took my life. It was only my kids that kept me going, because that drug messed my brain up so much, just like others have spoken of. I asked my doctor, what am I supposed to do while I'm in severe pain with this migraine, as my body now, since coming off the addictive drug, cannot tolerate any pain relief. So while I'm in migraine, I am in a very, very bad way and having to call on family just to coach me to get through it. Now, cannabis, it's a whole plant that's never caused a death and has been around for thousands of years and widely used up into the 1930s as medicine and as medicine for migraine and epilepsy in history. So we want choice to access whole plant, something with credible safety and natural synergy, and I want the ability to be able to grow it as medicine at home or grown here in New Zealand organically, not the synthetic isolates. Now, although I have spoken up today for my medical condition, which at present is not supported by the bill, I also speak for other health conditions as I know it helps with so many, and especially for pain. We have a right to be pain-free and have to have a choice for our medicine so we may live our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A complex problem. It's interesting looking through some of the qualifying conditions in the US. Roughly 10 to 20% have migraine as qualifying conditions, and this is what we're grappling with as well, the scope of this bill. Would that sit in the scope of this bill or not, or as someone said, don't have qualifying conditions, just have on the recommendation of your trusted general practitioner that yes, we believe this may help or not. That's sort of what we're grappling with, and you've added, just like someone else added PTSD to our range of thinking, you've added migraines to our range of thinking this morning. So I wanted to thank you very much for that, and we'll take on board what you've told us. Thank you. Good. I think we're in a teleconference for our final submitter, Christina Adamson, and then we'll clear the room just for a brief chat with select committee members once we've had this teleconference. Thank you. Can you hear me, Christina? Thank you. We'll just volume up at our end a little bit. Christina, this is Dr. Shane Reti speaking, Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee. Around the table this morning we have MPs Matt Ducey, Angie Warren Clark, and Elizabeth, you can turn your signs around to me, and Dr. Elizabeth Craig. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We have got your submission in front of us, and we have read it. We have 5 minutes with you. The time is yours. Please go ahead, Christina.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Health Select Committee for this opportunity to talk about my submission. I know that you have all had a busy morning and are keen to get off to lunch. I'm a chronic pain patient with centralisation, fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, PTSD, irritable bowel syndrome, and a list of other conditions that you have in front of you, all severe and debilitating. Unfortunately, some of these conditions and the cost made it impossible for me to travel from Auckland to talk to you all in person, so I would love to be there. I am a registered nurse and naturopath. I am also a steering group member and current administrator of the Auckland Patients Group. I've been a registered nurse for over 30 years and have seen and experienced the effects that pharmaceutical medication and the alcohol industry can have on our health. I have also worked with nutrition and herbs as a naturopath. Living with chronic pain is challenging on many levels. Taking long-term medications can be dangerous for your health. Often doctors gloss over the side effects. I know this as I've witnessed it, and I've had to answer my own and patients' questions afterwards. My mother suffered 2 strokes after years of being prescribed Celebrex for her arthritis and fibromyalgia condition. I was horrified to see Celebrex being touted as the new go-to in anti-inflammatories. When is the last time you looked up the side effects of Panadol or ibuprofen that they sell everywhere? Panadol can damage the liver, kill it even. Ibuprofen exacerbated my gastritis originally caused by a trial of Norflex that I was taking to control my severe and debilitating pain. I watched a friend's child with epilepsy slowly fade away with all the failure to stop his seizures. He died before he was 5. My aunt became addicted to methadone and it destroyed her. She and a close friend's mother committed suicide in the same year. the depression that overtook them from the desperation of dealing with the cocktail of drugs they were taking to treat their cancer was too much to bear. My good friend, ACG member and fellow advocate Joan Cowie died a month ago after her desperate struggle with cancer. I could go on for the rest of the day about my experiences as a nurse. 30 years, I've seen a lot. It is against our rights as humans and patients to deny us the science as medicine any longer when it has been shown to help and ease the suffering of many chronic complex conditions. From Parkinson's to epilepsy, chronic pain, spasms to cancer, stroke and trauma, patients' rights to services of an appropriate standard are not being met. The patients have become their own experts, and the doctors need to respect their wishes and bring back a herbal medication that's been used for thousands of years. However, we understand it's a bit like expecting doctors to suddenly start prescribing milk thistle and dandelion root. I have met many patients, some of whom are desperate for access and others are successfully treating their conditions with cannabis. A lot of them are not terminal and would not be covered under the current legislation being offered. The patients voted for Labour in the Greens because they were offered hope with their promise to make medicinal cannabis legal. We request an immediate moratorium on the medicinal cannabis community until the law is more compassionate to some of the most bravest, most vulnerable members of society in New Zealand. According to a New Zealand Ministry of Health report in 2008, cannabis is a legitimate advance as a therapeutic option, safer than alcohol, a potential panacea for general health maintenance and protection. The reason for these legitimate claims is because the dietary cannabinoid system regulates all food-rich health. This unique biological system is in every tissue and organ and is responsible to system demand and environmental conditions. We all need to educate ourselves about our endocannabinoid system. Cannabis is not psychoactive when raw. I know a lot of patients and their families who want to be able to grow their own, have access to raw plants and utilise whole plants for its entourage of synergistic effects and not just the isolated cannabis CBD. I have a prescription for Tilray CBD, 100 milligrams per mil. If I took the limit of my prescribed dose, I would go through 25 mils in a fortnight. This costs $660. It is working and it is helping, but the cost is unsustainable. Over the past years, I have managed to reduce my medications, manage my pain better, and my bowel function is improving slowly. Palpitations, muscle spasms are settling, and the eczema is not as reactive. Please show us some compassion, and please let us be patients with a quality of life, not criminals, and you will save lives. You can see my recommendations on the bill, on my submission, and other details. Thank you for listening to me. Do you have any questions?
Christina, your presentation was very clear and your submission is very clear as well. I think we mostly have what we need, although we can reach back to you. But I did want to thank you very much for calling in this morning and for sharing with us your story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Christina. Good. We'll now clear the room. Thank you, everyone. If we may, we'll reform at 1:15. It says 1 o'clock on the agenda. At 1:15, we'll reform in this room.